Good afternoon. The second panel is quite unique because we have government, industry, and promoters on the panel. I'm going to let Armand to do the introduction. Armand, since you're the only global citizen among us, why don't you talk about global citizenship and the industry in regard to residency by investment and citizenship by investments?
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for those who are here after such an exciting panel before. We're going to try to look from the industry from a different perspective as different stakeholders. You heard just before what governments are looking into attracting and models of attracting the right people with the right intermediaries. We have a quite different panel here where we have still government representatives, but as well government advisors, marketing agents, providers, service providers, and processing providers, in order to facilitate you as a client, or if you are representing clients, how this team of different stakeholders can enhance your value as an advisor to your client, or enhance your life if you are the end investor in the future global citizen. As I have briefly mentioned in other conferences recently, this industry is really growing and there is no way to stop it. I think the recent negative publications from Europe or in general are things that will pass with time. Thanks God, I think people have short memory loss. And every 5 years, still, different governments are coming and things are rolling. I've been in it for more than 15 years. And I do believe that the next 15 and 20 years, like you, Sam, will be still doing what we do.
25.
We'll be helping people.
25.
No, you're not that old. And so it is an exciting. With the level of countries and governments who are competing, one thing what we're seeing is prices are going down, which is a normal, economic effect of demand and supply. So if today the entry ticket, what I call the threshold for clients to obtain a second nationality or citizenship is $100,000. Anybody with a $1 million of personal net worth will be a potential client. Good news is there is 18 million millionaires around the world. And 3 million of them live in countries that have a passport with a mobility of 80 countries and less. That means that this is the perfect bonsai of our clients. You know how many clients per year apply for our kinds of services? Less than 30,000 families.
Oh, I would say less. If
Less.
you look at the RBIs and the CBIs, would be, I wouldn't say it's...
More than 20, but
yeah.
more than 20, but less than 30. In any cases, it's below 1% of these 3 million.
But let me stop you here. Why we don't have a correct statistics? Les?
Well, one of the reasons your statistics are not accurate is that in St. Kitts, for example, we don't publish our numbers, all right, on an annual basis. It's left up to the government, the Prime Minister, and in Parliament. And he has done this, I think, about 2 years ago, and recently we announced somewhere around 15,000 economic citizens.
From the beginning till now.
It's about the beginning.
In Malta, you guys published that. You have about, what, so far 800
Yes,
files?
out of the quota of 1,800 families, not passports, but families, we're talking about, we reached a level of 1,600 families, part approved, around 1,000 approved, and others in the system.
Cyprus? Numbers?
400 or so a year, 400 to 500. I mean, we've got a cap now of 700, as you're aware. We're told we're getting close to it, although how close is really a bit of a guess. And, certainly the numbers are up this year. So perhaps when the statistics are published, we're going to be between 550 and 600. I don't know if anyone's heard anything else different, but those are the numbers that
Armand, any more stats, interesting ones? You mentioned 180 million millionaires, or?
18 million millionaires.
18 millionaires.
18 million people have more than 1 million disposable investments, which means that they would have 100,000 to apply for such a program. Out of those, many lives, of course, in Europe and North America, which are not our target audience. But when we have analyzed this amount of net worth, high net worth investors in their passports, which mainly coming from countries like Asia, China, Middle East, exception UAE, which is the fourth best passport in the world as of yesterday. I believe that most of these people are interested and should be interested to expand their mobilities for 100 tickets, $100,000 investment. And why we're not doing more than 1%?
Eric, you have been in this business for over 25 years, I think.
Just like you.
me. You worked with HSBC, I believe, before you pushed the Canada UK investor program. Then you worked with another consultant, and now you're on your own. What are your takes about the industry? Where is it going?
Well, since I've been in it like you 25 years ago, on the demand side continues to grow by double digits. The number of millionaires, as Aman was suggesting, is not only big, it continues to grow double digits, 10 to 15%, depending on what wealth report you read, in terms of how many new millionaires are being produced on planet Earth each and every year. So you have growth on that side. What's changed since we started, Sam, is you used to only have 3-4 countries that did this. Canada, US, Australia, a little bit of UK came in. And now we're in a world where the supply side is really swelled to, on the residency side, well over 60 programs, and of course capping in close on a dozen citizenship programs. So we have a nice confluence of both the demand continuing to grow, the supply is still strong, and I think fast forwarding 5 to 10 years, you're going to see this continue. What's changed as well is it's tapping not only to the ultra high net worth market, like UK may have done, and like Malta continues and Cyprus continues to do, but as Aman was just pointing to, at an entry price ticket of 100,000, you're tapping into what bankers call the mass affluent market. And the mass affluent market, trust me, is humongous, not just in China, not just in Russia or the Middle East, but around the world. So this is big time, mainstream industry now. It really is.
I have a little problem here. If those who have been in this business will remember, up to 2012, Canada, UK were taking massive amount of business applicants a year. I believe Federal was taking 3,000 in Canada. Quebec was taking about 6,000. Those are just the passive investors. And then there was the entrepreneurs. We're almost above 10,000 applications a year. Suddenly in 2014, we canceled 62,000 federal investor applicants. But up to 2014, 2015, nobody was talking about our clients. And now suddenly that we have out of this market, well, somehow, and we are having small countries, little countries with small number of inhabitants, and now they have started their passive investment on residency programs. Now we see massive negative articles about them. What's your take on that? Why do you think, Eric?
I think any industry that goes through that, that product cycle that every, university will tell you about, every product has its cycle, and we're entering into, well, definitely still in the growth phase, but very much entering into the mature phase as well. Lots of entrants, still some good money to be made. Wherever there's investment and money, there are intermediaries that will facilitate it. So everyone, particularly in this part of the world, has some involvement or some connection, either at the center or at the periphery. Developers, estate agents, tax advisors, bankers, etc. So I think it was at the last conference that you and I attended, there was a good graph to show how many direct and indirect practitioners, stakeholders are linked to this industry, which started at first purely residency. And now, we have the citizenship by investment market that's taken off. So that's the second arm. And I predict there will be this third arm that's linked more around just the fact that people are more global and they could choose where they become a resident. And we're going to have tax residency programs start to emerge as we just announced a few months ago in Anguilla.
Yes. Well, so there seems to be more negative press now that we have, these little countries than where the big ones were doing this business. And everyone seems to bring in look at it from a tax perspective, bad guys. And OECD pictured us quite badly, I would say, and thinking there's a blacklist, which is not true. Nestor, you have a financial background. Of course, now you're heading a citizenship unit. What's your take on OECD's recent article and the fact that they are trying to push the fact that everyone applying into these programs is primarily for tax evasions?
Sam, there's no getting away from it that the Caribbean Islands program provides a wonderful option or alternative in comparison to all of the so-called big countries that you refer to. There are some features of the Caribbean region program or OECS Islands program that does provide a wonderful cushion opportunity for many citizens around this world, or those persons who may want a second citizenship. I think that there seems to be a notion, and no, you refer to us as the little islands.
I'm sorry, yeah, it's just a question of size. I mean, when I compare it with Canada,
I take it in good steps, but there seems to be that notion that because you are small, that you ought not to be engaged in particular sectors. And I believe that the developed world understands that the Caribbean program is a wonderful option. It's a wonderful option. It does provide a wonderful exit strategy for many persons around this world. And therefore, I believe there is a tendency, and I've seen it play so many times in my lifetime, that whether it's tourism, whether it's the financial services sector, specifically the offshore sector, our agricultural sector, there is always that tendency for us not to be involved in the big game. But I hold a view, as Artan said, that this is going to evolve. I have absolutely no concern that the program is going to die overnight. Absolutely not. But it's going to evolve. It may become a different creature. But the truth is, as this world becomes so uncertain, as people are torn apart, as people want the exit strategy, this program will exist. So I have absolutely no concern about the death of this program. What my primary concern is what we can do. That is, I said, from the governmental side as well as private sector side, like you guys, is what we can do together to ensure that we make these programs viable and that we make this program as clean as we possibly can. So I think that is the premise under which I would like to pursue the discussions.
Jean-Philippe, in Malta, I mean, you guys are trying to introduce ways to actually feed this negative press by saying that we're introducing cryptocurrencies, our personal tax rate is less, it's a great place to do business in terms of tax avoidance. How do you come up with the paper that OECD had published? Briefly, please.
Sure, I'll try. So for the 15 plus years I've been in legal practice, I've experienced both small islands. You mentioned small islands of Malta and Cyprus, which is where my firm operates. And I take what you say as a compliment in the sense that, firstly, over 15 years, the experience of attracting the affluent, the mass affluent through permanent residency programs has evolved into a fully blown citizenship by investment program. Cyprus adopting a real estate and business investment route, whereas Malta following the St. Kitts model of a donation route. However, I think both countries, and this is possibly where they differentiate, geographically their historical baggage is different, and they are positioned as countries that could be places where people move to. People could live there. They're still close to the bigger countries in Europe, in the Middle East. And therefore, Malta's and Cyprus' take on the programs is that we are not simply entering a transaction whereby you invest and we give you a passport. This is part of a more holistic, and you mentioned the tax advantages, the cryptocurrency. These are some of many other niche sectors that small states promote to attract clean investment. Now, cryptocurrency in the context of...
I'm going to come back on the clean investment in a few seconds.
Sure. So cryptocurrency in the context of Malta is a big thing. Malta has adopted the same approach it took back in 2004 when it legalized online gambling. So it said, look, this is a high-risk activity. It is disallowed or legislated against in many countries, and therefore that pushes the industry underground or offshore. And we adopted the opposite approach. Let's legalize it, let's regulate it, let's supervise it. And I think Malta has proved that it was able to take on a high-risk sector and actually properly take care of it to make sure that it does contribute to the GDP and the well-being of the country. the online
have
gambling.
surplus.
Exactly. So, in the first time in history, in the last 5 years, we don't run a deficit, which can't be said of many big countries in Europe. So, cryptocurrency is no less. I can tell you, within the conceptualization by the Prime Minister had mentioned the concept of Malta Blockchain Island back in November 2017. It took us, because we are small and nimble, only 7 months for the law firms and the government to work together to legislate, and in July we had our first blockchain legislation, world first legislation.
Thank you. Savas, you're a practitioner, you practice in Cyprus and Malta. What do you think about the program in Italy that's actually purely coming in and saying, become a resident, pay us €100,000 a year, and your Italian tax residency? How you compare that with your residency by investment program that you have in Cyprus or Malta? I mean, are they directly competing with the two programs you promote?
Look, I think they're certainly very different products. With the investment level, the ticket in Cyprus being what it is, and certainly Malta being not too far behind in terms of...
What is it in Malta? Residency? Residency by investment?
€250,000 in government bonds.
Is that permanent residency for life?
That's permanent residency for life.
And what is it in Cyprus?
The residency is 300,000.
Permanent residency?
Permanent residency, yes.
But this is different to the Italian program that is a tax.
Is yearly.
Each and
Is
year.
So the Cypriot and Maltese
It's a
programs
tax
aren't
residency
tax.
program.
Yes.
That's
can't
correct.
really-
I mean, these programs that are designed for tax residency, I think, are going to add an additional layer of complexity. You know, I want to say a couple of things about
Please.
the OECD report as well. I mean, for me, I think that the citizenship, the speed of citizenship, specifically if you know, and those of us that have supported clients in opening bank accounts around the world understand what it's like. This has created a complete new ballgame with the speed in which you can obtain a passport. Walking into a bank and providing a tax residency or a tax ID is one thing if you're holding a Canadian passport. It's a completely different ballgame and approach if you're holding a passport from a country where you're able to obtain it in 3 or 4 or 5 months. So when the CRS model was designed and implemented and you know, praised for the effectiveness that it was supposed to create,
And enforcement.
I think our industry, you know, and the growth, especially with direct citizenship, especially with the speed with which some of these programs work, have really created a problem. And I think if you look at the OECD and the report they put out, it's, you know, it's almost like an oops kind of report. You know, we didn't consider this, now this is happening, and you've got people that are going and they're getting these citizenship programs, residency for taxation reasons aside. If you're getting a residency in Italy, you're still walking in with a passport from your country of nationality, your home country. It's a lot more difficult to bypass the system. Whereas if you're walking in with a Cypriot passport, I mean, I hold Canadian, I hold Cypriot. My tax residency is clearly Cypriot, okay? But I'm not opening an account anywhere in the world with my Canadian passport. I'm not using, you know, certainly using my Cypriot tax ID, but as the program evolves, as the CRS, the anti-taxation avoidance, you know, us being able to walk in with these types of passports, and many of our clients, changes the dynamic. Enforceability is a huge issue. I don't believe that the tax residency programs are going to be quite as effective. I think the banks are going to be able to evolve. The OECD is going to evolve, and I think the governments can evolve to combat the risk created by tax residency programs. But the citizenship is a much more complex problem to get around from an enforcement point of view.
You guys are going to be announcing soon the Anguilla program, residency. It's a British territorial, it's a BUTC.
Yeah, BUTC.
Why do you think this program is coming now?
It's coming now. Well,
And
first
why?
of all, like many small nations, Anguilla is in dire need of foreign direct investment. And given its stature as a British overseas territory, it's not going to be able to play in the citizenship space. And frankly, as lovely as it is, it's not also going to attract that many new inbound residents. So it's going to enter into this more niche space dominated by the likes of Jersey, Guernsey, a little bit of the Swiss cantons, and now Italy, who again comes out of 100,000, and is going to tap into a client, and this is the key. This is not about tax evasion. This is about acknowledging that you have a growing, small still, but growing segment of the world population who, guess what? They can split their time having 90 days or less anywhere around the world. They can. And they're either rock stars, they're in the sports industry, they are in the arts and entertainment field. They're guys like us who roam the world and do business anywhere around the world, either that or on a yacht. And they're traveling around the world. So when you do that, you can then choose where you're going to be tax resident. So this is, again, a legitimate solution for those people who have that lifestyle. And all I'm saying is, with globalization, that train has left the station and continues to have more of these types of people. I see it as a growth area, but yes, it's going to be a challenge for the banks, for OECD, and for CRS, no doubt about it. But you can't reverse it, just like you can't reverse citizenship by investment. It's here to stay.
Well, coming now to a more general subject of global citizenship, Armand, you started by saying how many people are potentially capable of applying into these programs. But tax is just one issue. Applying into these programs, such as the Caribbeans, we have fantastic attributes in terms of free travel access. But is there a danger that these attributes changes? I mean, when we started with these programs, I mean, when I started with St. Kitts, they only had access to UK primarily, and then later on, they obtained their Schengen access. And since then, we almost read every couple of weeks that a new country is signing a visa-free access protocol with them. I mean, I think it's St. Lucia that has now agreements with the UAE government for the diplomats to walk in here without a visa, and soon maybe even the citizens. What's your take on it? What should they do in order to keep this? I mean, there's talk of due diligence. What else can you say? How can they make their citizenship more value? Is it including a tax residency in there?
Thanks. Well, Sam, the way that these countries have realized in the last 25 years is the kind of resource that the residence or citizenship represents for them, the same way as gold and oil represented for this part of the world a tremendous discovery. So looking at the small island nation and what we call also developing nations, Caribbean, Balkans, Pacific Islands, where natural resources don't exist. And today our industry represents, I would say, the only sustainable other solution than the IMF and the World Bank. They have to look into how can they protect it and what measures they have to on the government priority level to maintain this mobility. Because if mobility is what our clients and freedom is buying, the only way to keep them happy is to protect that asset of the passport. Now, more and more countries are signing bilateral agreements. And as I said, our passport index is now monitoring live, I would say on a daily basis. More and more countries are signing unilateral, bilateral agreement or visa on arrival. And I don't believe in a world without borders. I still believe that in 100 years there's still going to be borders. But I do believe that in 100 years, most of the passports will allow visa-free exceeding 150 countries. Because people and countries realize the benefits of mobility in terms of transport, in terms of tourism, economic development, exchange of know-how, but they want to see controlled mobility. So controlled mobility, it's what the whole, I would say, OECD European Commission is against. Is they want to know who is going where, who has what passport. So the only way to protect it is between G2G, government level, to agree to share information. They shouldn't be hidden lists, they shouldn't be special deals, there shouldn't be people with unofficial passports. You know, the level of, transparency on who's getting who on a government-to-government level, not on the publicly listed on the website, but on the intelligence community, is the only way to solution to protect this industry. And with the Balkans, who are coming as the next frontier in this industry, from Montenegro, Albania, Macedonia, Moldova, Armenia, who are all launching programs within the next 3 to 9 months, this is even more problematic for the European Union, because these countries have a more special status than the Caribbean. Not only that they have a visa-free arrangement like the Caribbeans or the Pacific Islands, but this is an EU candidate. So they might remove visa-free for one country who is Caribbean, like Canada did with St. Kitts, but they cannot do that for an EU candidate country, which is part of the negotiations on a 10, 20 years deal. So the only way to cooperate is the only way further.
Thank you. The banana wars, those who know what's that expression mean, created the St. Kitts and Nevis passport. So out of those tariff wars between UK and the Caribbean countries, St. Kitts was forced to come up with the first ever citizenship by investment program. How has been the history dealing with you? I mean, since then, you had the first ever program, and now you have 4 other Caribbean countries that have programs that are directly competing with you, and now they have the Europeans coming into this game. How has St. Kitts dealt over time with this increasing number of programs coming in, and how will you guys deal with it in the near future with more Eastern European countries coming into the game or to this space?
I think most people know that back in 2014, 2015, around 2015, St. Kitts did feel the brunt of a number of factors. One was the loss of visa-free entry into Canada. One was a FinCEN notification, competition from Antigua, Dominica. These were factors that it was like a perfect storm hitting St. Kitts and Nevis. At a time when the country had experienced an influx of applications. And we saw the Iranians, we also had the Iranian situation. We then went into a mode of correction, strengthened our process, did our rebranding, improved our due diligence, and then started to work on relationships. So we saw a complete decline in applications back in 2015. 2016, we saw a steady low volume. 2017, we started to see an increase. We came out with the Hurricane Fund at the end of 2017. That has been a success story that everybody knows about. We continue to deal with that, but we're now past the Hurricane Fund in the true sense of new applications, and what I'm seeing is an actual doubling or tripling of volume from back in 2016. So it's a steady increase. I think there's a strong belief in St. Kitts and Nevis, again being the oldest, again in terms of due diligence. We have worked with our international partners, with the US, Canada, EU. It's about an education process. We've shown them that we have strengthened our process. Obviously, we continue to be criticized as a group in the Caribbean. I don't think it's specific to St. Kitts. I think we all recognize that the 5 islands representing or doing citizenship in the Caribbean, if something goes wrong in one, it's going to affect all. So, Nestor, myself, and Nathan, and so on, we're all very, very diligent in what we do. And I think we have to continue getting that message. In the panel before, Nestor made a point that, we do have an association. We do need to do more as an association. And I believe we need help. We are talking to different parties, but as heads of the units, we get drawn into the process. We get drawn into the politics. We get drawn into all the different factors that impact our specific countries, and we actually need to spend some more time. And I think that's the education process coming out of that is going to have the benefits going forward.
My take on your answer is that you're primarily looking at your Caribbean countries competing with you, but what about the Europeans not coming in? Up to last year, having Cyprus at 2 million, Malta at 600,000, donation, etc. They were in a different category. But now that new Europeans are coming, Moldova, Montenegro, is that going to affect, or how is it going to affect?
My personal take on that is there's a market for everyone. And, the Middle Easterners, the Chinese, they have a need, and we offer alternative types of strategies. And I think we're going to see it. And, St. Kitts and Nevis lost the Russian market back in 2015 or so on. And it went to Cyprus and Malta and so on. We still see applicants coming from the region, but not as much as we had before. So I think there is a market for everyone. I think there's a niche. Different countries are going to have problems. Do they speak English? What are the residency requirements? So I'm optimistic about where we're going in the Caribbean, but in terms of competition, I believe that.
Well, I don't want to say competition, product differentiation or citizenship differentiation, which brings me to the question to Armand on one side, and maybe Jean-Philippe and Savas on the other side. Malta, Cyprus, how do you feel about now these Eastern European countries to come in? I mean, Montenegro, they have the livability, it's going to be less expensive. How do you feel about them?
If I can take this.
1 minute?
Sure. Yes, I think it creates another level. I think it's going to be a mid-range product between the much more affordable Caribbean programs and the more expensive European programs of Cyprus and Malta. Of course, everything hinges on the true value of a candidate country, of a European Union candidate country, hinges on the likelihood and the timeline to European citizenship. So, and of course, I think the relative low price tag attached to it is reflective of that risk. But still, it addresses a different segment altogether.
I mean, I largely agree with what Jean just said. I mean, it comes down to timeline and what is the comparatives in terms of characteristics between the programs. Certainly we're not in Cyprus, where I'm largely focused. We're not hearing from our candidates a lot about these other programs. And I would say as time has moved on and the program has matured, we're actually hearing less and less. I think if you go back to 2-3 years ago, we used to hear a lot about Portugal. We used to hear a lot about some of the other residency programs. I think that as the programs have matured, the quality and the type of candidates are much more informed. They understand the programs. They know what they want. And timeline is a massive factor, as Jean just said. Entry into the EU, you're talking about months versus years in order to access the benefits of a Cypriot or Maltese passport compared to some of these new ones coming in. So I agree with what was said earlier. There's a market for everyone. The programs are differentiated enough between Europe and the Caribbean and some of the residency programs that they're more ideal for some candidates than others. But we're seeing now a type of client that's got a much longer term view. It's part of a succession plan that is much broader in scope than what we used to get. It's not somebody that needs to do something very quick and is just quickly presented options. This has been given thought. And I think as you differentiate, you're going to see the programs are not quite as similar as we might think, looking at it at a very high level.
Armand?
Well, I believe that the Balkan option is for a different audience, as we said, with the price entry of 250,000 investment in the real estate in the north, which is the highly unemployed area, and a 450, which will be on the coastal area. is more comparable with Portugal residency program, with the Bulgarian residency program, or with the Hungarian residency program, where for that level of investment, on one side you're obtaining European residence in Portugal, allowing you to travel in 28 countries. For that same amount in Montenegro, you're gaining a citizenship within the same period, 6 to 9 months, that allows you to travel again to Schengen area, plus many other countries. It's 114 countries right now. So on a short-term solution, I would say is better, and same and better than the EU residence of a Schengen, like Maltese residence program. I think what is more interesting is that in 5 years, without any obligation that are on your side or your responsibility, there is a 95% chance that this passport will become as good as the Maltese or the Cypriot without you had to do anything. No learning a language, no living there, no paying taxes. In Portugal, all the responsibilities for you qualifying for the citizenship in 6 years on your side. You have to spend 2 years per year. You have to maintain the residence and addresses in Malta. You have to learn the language. So if I'm a client, I would choose the less responsibility, same price ticket, more mobility now, and better chances of that passport becoming a European and me paying, 20% of the price what I would have paid 5 years. Of course, if I'm a billionaire, that question is not valid for me. I would just pay now. If I had a 50 million plus liquidity, I would pay immediately now for Cyprus. But the point is, not everybody's there. In the market of affluent clients that we described, much will go to these options.
Question two, I don't know which one of you are going to take it, but are we commoditized citizenship? I mean, it's usually people are proud of their citizenship. I mean, some nationalities more than others are going to go fighting over it. But do you think we've made it into an object? And do you think is that correct? Is it the right path to go? Commoditization of citizenship.
Well, listen, history repeats itself. Sam, you remember in Canada, we had 10 provinces offering investment, migration funds. Quebec had its own thing, and then you had 9 other provinces having their own investment migration fund, for which the end product is the same, Canadian permanent residence. And what happened? We saw with financing and the structure of these funds a gradual decrease in the investment amount, to the point where the federal government of Canada took over in 1999 and created a federal fund. And I predict with Les being here and our CIU friends being here, I think that's the conversation the Caribbean has to have, because you got the Baltics coming in, Eastern Europe is grabbing attention to this, and the product differentiation, although they exist, and there are differences, make no mistake about it, but at the 30,000 feet may not be as apparent. Just like investing in Newfoundland or investing in BC gives you a Canadian permanent resident visa, as it did. So the client says, I'm getting the same end benefit, I just have to put it somewhere else. This is the conversation. It's a tough one to have. And I won't use the C word, but the market forces with the demand that we've explained. It's just a growth, double-digit growth each and every year, the number of millionaires being produced on planet Earth who wish to avail themselves of the privileges that all we in the Western world have been having all these decades. Why wouldn't they want to have it? Well, they are going to look for it. They're going to find it. The difference today is there's a lot of product. Good for us. They need help with service firms, professional firms like us, to help them navigate through all these differences. But make no mistake about it.
We become their trusted advisors.
Indeed.
Yes.
They're trusted advisors.
That's my sentence. Don't copy it. But
shortly, to answer, I just counted. We're 37 people in this room. I would guess that we're born in at least 22 countries from different places, which none of us choose. Why we have to be victim of the only choice in our life that was outside of our control? Why this passport that comes and says your place of birth that was not your choice will determine who you are, where you can go, and how free you're going to feel? So yes, if we can create a commodity like what the gold and the money did for human society in the last thousands of years, why not the passport? So I'm sorry, but yeah, we are commoditizing it, and I hope that we're going to make it to more affordable to everybody.
So can we have several ones? I mean, there's 4 practitioners here. Are you seeing a trend where people are asking to buy more than one passport?
The combo,
or more
we
than,
call
sorry,
it.
2?
Yeah. It's called the combo.
Yeah, combo, huh? Because I think in the past 2-3 years, the trends I'm seeing is that A lot of our clients who obtain the citizenship, they come and tell us, okay, I need another residency and I need another citizenship as well. So the old expression dual citizenship, I think, is gone, and now we have multiple citizenship and multiple residencies.
Sam, why are you seeing that? Why are people doing that, as from your experience?
Well, I guess I think what brings our clients, I mean, you guys are supposed to talk, I'm supposed to give the
You get to
questions,
ask the
but I
question.
think it's a fear factor. I think what motivates anyone to walk into our office is a fear factor. They're not sure about their citizenship. They're not sure about the government. They're not sure about access they have. Today they have access, tomorrow they don't. I can give a name of countries where in the 70s they have unlimited access anywhere, then suddenly in the beginning of 80s they're considered less than nothing, and now it's a struggle. It's a roller coaster. So yes, plus it's like our clients, as I said in the beginning, are the rich. The rich guys have several cars. Why not several passports? It is becoming commoditized.
Sam, I would disagree with the categorization of this as a commoditization. I think the essential elements, as a lawyer, I look at it legally. In a commercial transaction is that you have the object, the price, and an agreement to exchange the two. Here, what we see first is a due diligence process where someone applies and needs to prove his eligibility on completely terms that are not financial. So there are terms to do with his good standing, his reputability, and so on. Only upon his approval is he allowed to pay the entry ticket to get in a program. So I don't think that this fits in very squarely. So I think there are lots of strong arguments in favor of this. Why shouldn't it be acceptable to buy a passport? But maybe it's not even a commercial transaction.
Well, I think yes, please.
I think I really want to endorse what my colleague just said here. And I've always held the view, although being in the industry for a very short time, that I refuse to see this program and the passports as being a commodity. There are elements of it that may appear to be, but I don't support the notion that it's essentially a commodity. And it may be the fundamental reason why, as a region, we're dealing with some of the issues that we're dealing with. And the colleague to the far end made a note that the region may need to come together and speak about this. And it was only yesterday that a colleague approached me and said, Nestor, you must allow the market to dictate the price of this commodity that you have there. And that is the inherent dangers that we face. And if we allow it to go this route, then it means that our passports become cheap. It becomes meaningless. So sometimes I refuse to see this as a commodity because, and again, he made a very clear point that there is a process. You don't just apply and you get a passport. There is a deliberate process that one goes through to get this passport. And therefore, I believe the time has come where, as a region, we need to start speaking about this and looking at whether we allow the market to dictate the price of a product. And that this product should go to everybody as a cheap product. I don't hold this view. And therefore, I find it very difficult sometimes to accept the fact that it's a commodity that we are trading. We are not.
I mean, go ahead.
Actually, one last point. In a shop, buyers are never rejected.
What is not rejected?
In a shop, buyers are never rejected.
That's right. Let's have the price that was compared for.
I didn't really agree.
From the country perspective, I equate some of this analogy into the sports world. You're from Montreal. Manchester United fans will remember there was an age in which you had to be from the city in which you represent to play with that city. Montreal Canadiens, you had to be from Quebec. And all this is not that far away or that long ago. But guess what? When there's other teams, you all of a sudden realize you want to build the best team. You want to attract the best people to win in your particular sport. So countries like Malta, like the Caribbean, they wave a flag and say, look at us. Now there is a process, and it's diligent, and it's comprehensive, but if you get through it, welcome to our team.
I think there's another factor too. If you go back again, I don't know why everybody's talking about Canada, but if you go back, look at the Canadian Citizenship Act, we used to emphasize on the fact that you need to hold your residency just for 3 years. We were not really keen on how many midnights have you spent in Canada. Today, we are really putting an emphasis on how many midnights you've been in Canada to see if you have your 1,095 days. But if you go back 15, 20 years ago, as long as you had held your residency for 3 years, that was good enough to apply for your citizenship. I guess it's the Western governments now trying to apply their own model to other, and this is what was reflected in the OECD's report. They're saying, well, if you want to give your citizenship to someone, you need to show they had attachments, links, residence, physical presence, and they slept a certain number of nights there. Now that the Western governments, like Canada, is not using that model anymore, they want to push everyone to use a model where your new citizens, they have to have shown that they have slept so many nights, they had so many years residency. Is it commoditization? I don't know. I guess we have to continue this at our next
Sam,
panel next year.
I'd
Yes?
like just to add one thing. I think commoditization is a broad statement. I think what we have done is commoditize the process, and we should not confuse the process with the passport or the product. And we all have products. So I think that's the differentiation. And you look at it in the financial field, when we talked about swaps and currency options and so on, we commoditized that, but we didn't commoditize the price, we didn't commoditize the spreads, we commoditized the documentation. And that's what we're doing.
So before we end, I'm going to ask every panelist to give their take, which I'm going to put on my Twitter, about this panel. So we start your take on what we discussed. So what's your take? Eric, what's your take about all this last 45 minutes?
I thought it was a frank conversation, actually. I think we touched on wider industry issues that we're still grappling with. I think there was a bit of foresight around where this could be looking like in a few years. Les's last point I actually really do like, because you're absolutely right. It's more about the processes, about the steps, not so much around the product, and your analogy is a good one. So even guys like me who've been around for a while, we learn a few things along the way in terms of how to frame the dialogue. So from that perspective, I thought it was interesting.
Thank you. Armand?
Well,
one take.
we know each other for a long time, so I think none of us really learned anything from, I mean, this is the same conversation we've been having. I just hope for you as an audience, you learned something about this industry that left you with more positive than negative, because it is a very political subject, and when you turn from CNN to anything, you know, citizenship and immigration and passports are everyday news, but keep the positive side from what we're discussing and leverage it.
Thank you. Savas?
I think if you're a service provider in the audience, understanding how the industry is evolving, the different programs, the way the banks are involved, the governments, the OECD, there's value to the way you approach the programs, the way you promote them, the way you advise clients. I think if you're a client or potential applicant that's sitting here listening to a lot of us, perhaps a lot of this stuff could be confusing and overwhelming. There are a lot of programs. There's new programs. Each have, you know, very detailed, unique sort of differences that you can't see until you really dive into them. So for anyone that's here, I mean, certainly we've all known each other for years. The idea here is not for us to learn a lot from each other, but from the audience to learn from us. I think come find us. We're going to be here the next few days, and let's dive into things deeper. And you know, if Cyprus is a program that's right for you, then it is. If Malta is, I mean, we've all got different levels of expertise, and I hope there was value to the audience here today. I believe there was.
Thank you for your participation. Jean-Philippe?
Thank you.
I think that the subjects we discussed did also highlight the importance of maintaining standards. I disagree with this being a race to the bottom. I think there is an opportunity for each country to leverage the financial gain it is making from each of these programs to improve the country and to diversify and create other angles to the same program. I think Malta and Cyprus have been very good examples in terms of setting standards, or improving their standards over the years, so that the perception that the media is trying to create, that these are programs that are there to be abused for tax or money laundering purposes, will be killed forever.
Thank you. Mr. Nestor?
I think the Caribbean islands over the past 30 odd years have provided a wonderful solution to the migration issues of this world. I believe that there are some fundamental issues that we will continue to confront, and we must find a cohesive way of dealing with those issues. I am a firm believer that this program will evolve. As long as there are people in this world, as long as there are mistrust, this program will continue existing. And therefore, I think we must prepare ourselves to move with that evolving spin and make it a lot better than it was yesterday.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, closing remarks?
I think it's important that we recognize that the media plays an important role in the perception of these programs. And what we say, how we say it, is very critical. I think this panel here did a great job in giving our views on a positive light and the concerns that we have. And I think it was a good session.
Thank you very much. Well, my take is that immigration is going to become central, immigration and citizenship in the upcoming years. So, well, the U.S. election seems to be revolting around this issue. Mr. Trump, or President Trump, announced some facts that is really ticking the electoral. I mean, the Mexican, the caravan of immigrants, the removing of the citizenship for people, children born in the U.S. In Canada, in our country, next year's election is definitely going to be, again, centered around citizenship. Europeans the same. So I think citizenship immigration is going to be the hot topics in the years to come. And therefore, I thank you for your insight about the industry and your participation. We're going to have 2-minute questions, just 3 maybe questions. Sir.
Hi. Before I put my question, I'll just wish to add one remark to what Mr. Khan said. The process of acquiring a citizenship by investment, yes, it has been commoditized. But I believe the passport, regardless of how you put it, it's an asset. For example, if a person is a Swiss, the Swiss passport is one of the very few, or the only one in the world, which doesn't state the place of birth of the individual. It does state that which canton are you receiving your citizenship from, but it does not state your place of birth. But if some country like St. Kitts does that, and it removes the place of birth from its passport, suddenly there's a pressure from the so-called developed world, and then St. Kitts has to order the passports back and has to do that. So it's an asset. It's an asset you are born with, okay? So when you are born with an asset which doesn't have much value, definitely once you're able to acquire a better asset, a better class, you would go for that. On the second note, it's a sort of a question as well.
Your questions.
That this is a question. These programs are here to stay. But with regards to the OECD thing, my question is, our industry is always on the defensive front and on the responsive front, that when EU publishes its blacklist, we say that, EU has blacklisted, say, X country from the Caribbean or from Europe. This is our response. When OECD does that, the OECS responses to that. But somehow we as an industry, or we as service providers, have failed to somehow make a prominent note to that. Most of the OECD countries themselves, they are among the top countries in the Financial Secrecy Index. And I would quote the Financial Secrecy Index here, that 6 countries of the top 10 countries in the financial secrecy, which offer the most secrecy in terms of your financial assets, are from OECD countries or their territories. Switzerland has a tax residence program, which is known as the lump sum taxation. Any ultra-high net worth individual from anywhere around the world can pay an annual tax to Switzerland. Okay, they are changing it in some canton, but it still is. And he needs not pay tax in any other country. But when a Caribbean country does that, it is criticized. So how are we going to respond to these things? There are I can go on, but since the time is short, how we as an industry, as the government representatives, as service providers, not be just on the responsive side, but present the true picture that these programs, which are here to stay, because the demand is there, okay? These programs, which are here to stay, how can we highlight the legitimate uses of these programs for the people who were not privileged enough to be born in a country with a good visa-free travel? Tax planning is altogether a different issue. For example, you do not need to be a resident in the US to make an offshore vehicle in Nevada, where even the US authorities cannot access your beneficial ownership.
We have 1 more minute left. So let me summarize this question in very quickly. Are we going to have a think tank soon to represent us? Yes? Yes. So, yes? No? Yes? Well, there was some, Arton, you guys tried an initiative, we tried with the GIIC. There was also the
IMC,
Council.
So the IMC, love it or hate it, is
we need a think tank, yes?
Whether is the association that regroups the industry. For now, they are aware of this issue. As far as I know, they're having a meeting next Tuesday as a first step to trying to get ahead of effectively the bad press. Not being in control of the message is really what you're pointing to. So the answer is it doesn't exist yet. It's ad hoc. It's individual countries, individual service providers saying their bit, publishing their views on such things. But the answer is we need, as an industry, to have a concerted voice around this. It's still a young industry in a historical sense, but one that's maturing very quickly. The answer is stay tuned, watch the space, and I actually do think the IMC is going to take that stick and move it forward.
Well, it's good for us to speak. What about the governments? Why don't you guys push this? It is directly to your benefit.
The governments of the region have recognized some of those issues. The government of the region also had to deal with those issues when the offshore sector was being attacked by the OECD. But the region has already spoken on the issues from the OECS level. The chairman of the OECS has made it very clear that they are going to make representations on the behalf of the islands within the region that's offering this program to the OECD. So I can say to you, the discussions are being had, and the approach for doing this is being looked at.
Okay, so there will be some push maybe from your governments to do that.
Definitely from the OECS
Yes?
level.
Good. One last question. It should be very brief. If no questions, we're going to end it. No, you had your chance. No questions. No, only questions. Only questions. No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.
It was a pleasure to be here.